Dobro jutro svima. Nadam se da ste se odmorili i da ste spremni za drugi dan konferencije. Ako ima još preko ljudi, molim da se prebace u ovu prostoriju. Prije nego što počnemo s predavanjima, samo dvije kratke obavijesti. Naš sponzor Site5, niko od njih nije prisutan ovdje, ali samo da napomenem da oni traže djelatnike koji rade remote na njihovom hostingu, tako da postoji na webu link za zainteresirane za zaposlenje na takvom tipu posla za Linuxaše koji mogu raditi iz Hrvatske, pa nek se jave tamo. I druga stvar je nagradna igra od Googlea za Nexus. Na ovim lecima imate link sa uputama kako učestvovati na nagradnoj igri gdje možete dobiti Nexus tablet. Let me introduce Miklos. He will talk about new features and new fixes in Libre Office.
Good morning, hello everybody. Thanks for coming early this morning just for this talk. And I'm a LibreOffice writer, developer of Collaborate, and I'm here today to present you a few fixes and features we implemented in the latest two major releases of LibreOffice. We typically have two major releases a year, so basically this covers the last year. If you are a developer, especially if you know some C++, then I will also cover how you can contribute to LibreOffice. It's not that hard to start. It used to be hard, but now it's no longer is. If you are an end user, then this talk is for you because it's about an Office suite. Everybody understands what an Office suite is, so maybe amateur radio, something is too complex for your mind, but an Office suite, that's something you will understand. So I will still just cover in a bit what LibreOffice is, in case you never ever heard about it. I will go through a few major fixes and features that we had in 4.2 and 4.3. And at the end of the talk, I would also would like to show a few prototypes that we have in the pipeline. They are not that quite usable at the moment, but it's something for the future. Also speak about all the changes and refactorings we do under the hood that's typically not visible to the end user. And at the end, I would like to speak a bit about the document foundation, the public charity behind LibreOffice, and also how you can help, or how we as Collaborate, a company, can help you as well. So LibreOffice is a project and a software. It's a free software. We have a built-in feature that's enabled on Mac and Windows that the client regularly, weekly by default, checks for some update if there is some new version to download. And using this, we can monitor the number of unique IPs. Of course, this is not exactly the number of users using LibreOffice, but still some number. As you can see, basically we have 1 million new unique IPs each week, which is quite a big number. We have quite some developers. We have more than 2,000 commits for the last month in our Git repository. And it's hard, once again, to decide exactly who is a developer and who is not, because it's completely fine to do just one contribution, or the given developer may be working on this full-time, so there are quite some differences. But if you use a reasonable definition of a developer, then we have around 100 developers, which is also quite a nice big number. So LibreOffice started as a fork of OpenOffice.org. The major problem with OpenOffice.org was that it was really hard to change it. It was really hard to contribute. You had to do lengthy specifications, various processes, and typically Oracle tried to do OpenOffice.org as a product of itself, and it was really hard to do for the community to do anything. And as you know, as of today, basically OpenOffice.org is dead, so it seems that it was a good idea to actually fork the code base and and build a new community around it, and to do what is basically today LibreOffice. So, what platforms do we support? We support 3 platforms today: Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's an interesting outcome that basically most users are on Windows, most developers are on Linux, and there are also the Mac is something between the two, so there are more Mac developers than Windows developers, but users are also, we have less Mac users than Windows. Actually, measuring the number of Linux users is quite hard because, I mean, the Linux LibreOffice users, because Linux distributions disable these update notifications because, as it should be, LibreOffice is typically installed using the distributions package manager. So it's we still get some requests, update requests from Linux, but that's just the minority who downloads Linux binaries from the document foundation. The majority of Linux users are not using LibreOffice like this. So typically when we are talking about fixes and new features, those are for Writer, the word processor, the Calc, the spreadsheet, and Impress, the presentation software. But for 4.2, we did a few major changes outside of these 3 applications. And the first one is the Start Center. So I don't know if you remember, previously, basically, the Start Center was just a huge screen with 6 small buttons in the center where you could start the applications. And especially with today's big screens, it was just a waste of space not to use the start screen for something more useful. So what we found out is that we now have a sidebar here with old buttons, and the big space is used for your recent documents, and there are thumbnails of these documents. So even if you have as you can see here, just the file name is shown, so if they are in different folders, then you can just look at the thumbnails, and that will help you decide which one of them you would like to open. And next feature that actually isn't specific to a given application is the CMIS integration. As an end user, you probably the most well-known CMIS server publicly available is the Google Drive. So, but there are quite some other ones. Larger enterprises typically have their internal CMIS server. So it's kind of a document repository, and previously you had to use your web browser to browse the repository, download the file manually, edit it, and then upload it back. Now you can do all this within LibreOffice itself, so you don't have to leave your Office suite when editing these files. And also there are some additional metadata for these files, and you can also edit them from inside LibreOffice and so on. There are quite some new fixes and features in Writer 4.2. My favorite one is that in previously you could have borders around pages and paragraphs, but not around characters. Now in HTML this is quite a trivial feature, but still it wasn't possible to do this in Writer. So you can claim that it's a new feature, and it is, but given that in every other places, even for text frames, you could have borders, I would call it, finally we face this long-standing problem. Also, actually this fix is something I did personally. So if in case the document started with a table, then you couldn't select the whole document with just Ctrl-A. And it was just a technical detail that basically the document is built from nodes, and this is a table node, and the paragraph underneath is a paragraph node, and basically the selection, in case the selection ended in a paragraph, and it did, then it also had to start in a paragraph as well, so in a text node. And here the document starts with a table node, and our underlying core didn't support selection starting in different type of nodes and ending in some other type of node. Finally, now you can do this. This is something like, we had a bug report open for quite some time, and it was just referring to the much older OpenOffice.org bug report. So this was a problem open for something like 10 years, and finally it's now gone. Regarding CLUC, probably, at least for me, my favorite new fix is that there were quite some additional conditional formattings. So depending on the content of the cell, you could have some formatting, like the background color of the cell or something like this. And now, just based on the content of the cell, you can have these bars and flags as well. This is something that we implemented for a customer, but as always, all the source code of LibreOffice is publicly available, and with the next major release, it's now available to everyone. One thing I would like to speak a bit in a bit more detail is the Calc storage rework we did for the two. That basically means that in Calc you have sheets, and inside sheets you have these columns and rows and the cells in between. And in the old time, basically, this was designed internally in quite. It was so nice in the beginning, so in an object-oriented mind, and it turned out that the result of this is that every cell was a different object, and it was somewhere in the memory in a completely different place. And when today's multi-core and CPUs came, and even people use the GPU for counting different things, which are may completely independent from graphics as well. Then we wanted to do something similar for Calc. So in case you have a large sheet with really similar formulas, that then you could do the calculation in parallel, as long as you have the data in the memory in some continuous place, so you can just pass all the data to the GPU. But you can't really do this if you have all your sources of different objects in some random memory locations. So actually, after the rework, what we have is that for different cell types, we have the contents of the cells in continuous memory locations, and that helps a lot. Basically, this way, it's possible to pass just a pointer and the length to the OpenCL framework, and it's possible that in case you have quite some cells having the same formula, then it's possible to send out the calculation to the GPU, and using OpenCL it will count it in a much faster way. So these are some results from this project. Basically, this is a logarithmic diagram, so if you see some difference, then there are quite some differences. And what you can see here is that the blue one is what was before the rework. The yellow one is basically the reference, but these were benchmarked with Excel files, so that's what the reference. And as you can see, in most of the cases, now we are faster at parsing or loading these Excel files than Excel itself, which is probably quite nice, because most probably the internal structure of Excel files is hyper optimized to work fast in Excel, and still now we are faster. So what about Impress? Probably at least for me personally, my favorite Impress feature in for the 2 is that you couldn't import a presentation from Apple Keynote, and now David Tarden of Red Hat spent quite some time on this, and now he has the first open source implementation of the Apple Keynote format, and he also integrated this parser to LibreOffice as well. So now you can open .key files in LibreOffice. So speaking of these import filters, now Document Foundation has a second sub-project next to LibreOffice. This is the Document Liberation project. And the first feature of 4.3 that I would like to present here is this LibreOffice. It's a framework for writing filters, so importers or exporters for a given application. This is used in LibreOffice, but not only in LibreOffice. So there are quite some formats using this framework. You can import WordPack files, old Mac formats, and quite some documents where basically the software that was originally used to create those documents are no longer available, and now you can have your documents back because a maintained Office suite will be able to open it again. On the other hand, it also has a few filters like the Keynote or the Visio one, where it's something that's a living application, but for example on Linux there are no alternatives to open it, and now you can do this. And it's a bit beyond just LibreOffice itself. For example, in Inkscape, you can also open Visio files, and it's using the same libvisio that's built on top of LibreOffice. That's the Document Liberation project. If you have some quite obscure format that would be really good to be able to open in Writer, Calc, or Impress, but you fear that writing an import filter is quite complicated, then you should read up on this Liberation project. It has the whole framework for the complex stuff of writing an import filter, and you can just focus on the specifics of your format. So it's much easier to write such an import filter than it was before. So regarding 4.3, in Writer, I guess one of the most amazing features is that finally you can have paragraphs which have a size that can be stored in 16 bytes. So no string can be as long as 2 gigabytes or something like this. And it was once again just an internal limitation. The LibreOffice was preceded by OpenOffice.org, and it was preceded by StarOffice. And when StarOffice was started, they started it in C++, but the standard library wasn't available back then. So they invented all their internal containers, string classes, and so on. And for strings, there were actually 2 string classes. One that had this limitation of the 16 bytes limit for the size, and the other is not. And of course, it's not a user visible feature to revert the code base to just use one string class. So it didn't happen in the past. Typically, Oracle didn't have time for this. They typically rejected any code contribution from the community, so it didn't happen for a long time. And now this is typically a fruit of the open community model, how we develop LibreOffice today. There were quite some people who helped with this refactoring. It was semi-mechanical work. We had a wiki page on how to convert one area of the code from one string class to the other, and finally now the old one is gone, so now you can have these large paragraphs. In practice, this is only important because if you copy-pasted some large HTML page into Writer, then typically not typically, but in many cases in HTML, the break tag was used, not a new paragraph for a logical new paragraph. So basically, when you copy-pasted some large text from a web browser to writer, then you ended up with a single paragraph, and then this limitation was quite annoying. So you tried to paste it, and only the first half of it arrived, and there was basically no way to fix this. So this is also no-go. So what's next? The number one requested feature in the Bugzilla for years in LibreOffice was that if you had notes in a writer document and you printed the document, then the notes weren't in the printout. And we did quite some rework regarding commands. I was personally involved about 2 years ago in improving the command feature so that you can not just add a command at a given position, but you can have a selection and then you can annotate this text range. And recently, Calc McNamara of Red Hat also added support for actually having these commands in the printout as well. So no, I don't know what's the new top requested feature now, but this was the one that we had for years. And now this is also fixed. The next one is still for writer, and this is once again something I have been personally involved. In case of OXML, so for writer, that means the docx format. They have two markup languages to describe shapes, like something complex like here, but even for a text box or a rectangle or something like this, these markups were used. There was an old markup called VML. It's a one-to-one representation of the old binary format. And there is a new markup that on the Microsoft side, they introduced in Word in 2010 that's called DrawingML. And it's a new markup, so it's no longer complete equivalent of the old binary formats like the binary .doc format. And in writer, we used to only read the VML markup. When you write DrawingML, there is also a fallback section, so you always write the VML markup as well, so you can decide what you read. If you read the DrawingML, that's the full representation, or you can just read the fallback. And we used to just read this fallback, and also we only wrote the VML markup. And now this is also fixed, so if both representations are available, then we read DrawingML and we write both. And visually, you can see the difference, but it was just some math, and now it's much more reasonable. But the good thing is that the DrawingML import is shared for Calc and Impress as well. So all the work the Impress guys took into the DrawingML import, like shape adjustments and many little nifty details. Now that's all available to writer as well. So basically, writer was it had its own way to handle shapes from OXML format, and now we fixed this, and now it's using the same framework that's used for Calc and Impress as well. My favorite feature for Calc, it's just a small change, but once again, fixing some consistency. In case of writer, for a long time it was a variable in the toolbar, the number of characters and words you selected and what you have in the document in total. And for Calc, it would have been quite useful to have the same, but it wasn't a variable. Now it is, so when you do a selection, then you can see the number of columns and rows that you selected. Impress had quite some small but annoying usability problems. One of these is that if you zoom out or in, you can do that. You can also specify a given number. So I want a 100% zoom or something like this, but it wasn't possible to fit the slide to the current window. And when you are working on a slide, you typically want this. So you now, next to the zoom slider, we have a small button that does just that. So, what prototypes do we have? The first prototype I would like to present is a collaboration prototype. It's implemented for Calc. It could be implemented for other applications as well. The idea is that if you look at, for example, Google Docs, it's amazing how many features people give up just to be able to collaborate. If you look at the wikis, people used to say that what you see is what you get is a must, and just to be able to collaborate, they gave up all this and learned once again to type all this markup manually, just to have something, a page where they can collaborate. So it turns out that collaboration is really, really important, and it's quite bad that you can't do the same from LibreOffice, where you already have all the what you see is what you get features. So what we implemented for Calc is that it can integrate with the telepathy framework. In fact, this is the telepathy cubes, where the assumption is that you probably already have a Jabber account. If you don't know what Jabber is, you probably have at least a Google account that's also a Jabber account, for example. But there are quite many other Jabber servers, or you can host host a Jabber server yourself, and so on. So you probably already have some IAM account that you use for IAM on a daily basis already. So what about using those communication channels to actually transfer data as well? And that's exactly what telepathy cubes are doing. On one hand, they are just reusing IAM accounts for communication, but on the other hand, they give us just a transport protocol where we can write, send and receive data just like a TCP socket or something like that. So what we implemented is that there is a file collaboration menu item, and there you can send a document to another Jabber contact, and once the Jabber contact accepted receiving this file, then any of the changes that you do on either side of the communication is also done on the other side. And then there are quite some synchronization problems, like how to resolve conflicts and so on. And what we do is that we intercept all the inputs, like the mouse clicks and the keyboard, and then so on. Before affecting the spreadsheet itself, we send it out to the common communication channel which is ordered, and when the event arrives back or arrives from the other side, we apply this action on the document. So in case you try to modify the same cell, then just whoever is the last will win. You won't have conflicts, and in case in case it happened that you wrote I don't know, 1 to a cell, and just after pressing enter you see 2, then you can just quickly discuss it should be 1 or 2 and fix it. So no complex conflict resolving user interface is needed, and so on. And of course that because at a local level we are just emulating all the inputs from the user. If you modify a cell where the chart has to be updated as well, then the chart is updated instantly, and so on. So no features of Calc is disabled just to support this collaboration. So I guess that's the cool thing in this feature, that in other collaboration software, typically you have less features to be able to support collaboration, and here you just have collaboration on top of an existing spreadsheet software. So the next topic where we don't really have something yet, and still working in this area, and something will come soon, is Android. We have an Impress remote. I almost wanted to actually demo. So, for example, this is also an Android phone, and it would be possible to control the presentation from this phone, except that if you have Blues 5, then that's a problem, because at least, for example, the KDE version that came with my Linux distribution is not fully supporting Blues 5. So basically on this notebook I have a broken Blues stack. But if you have a working Blues stack, then it works quite nicely. You can look at the presenter notes, or you can see the next slides or the list of slides, and so on. And you can walk around and still have your laptop at the fixed place. So that's a nice thing. This Impress remote is available in the Play Store, so you can just download it and use it after pairing and enabling one option that's described here. So basically you just try to use it, and at the first time it will say then connection is failed, and where you need to enable it. That's for the reason so that you will control the presentation and not somebody else from the audience, which would be probably funny but not that useful. So this Impress remote is something you can try today and use it. There are at least two other Android related prototypes. One is a viewer. This is something that I guess you have to build it yourself at the moment. It's using the same layout engine that's available on the desktop, so it's not something written from scratch and limited, just like basically every other Office suite that's available on Android today. So if you look at the what's the most popular, probably this Quick Office. That's something that can open these Office files, and they implemented something from scratch. So they have quite some limitations from the more complex graphics operation and so on. What we did is that the whole layout engine is the same engine that's available on the desktop. Just the user interface is different. We are rendering each page of a document into some bitmaps, and then you can just scroll over the pages and then so on. It turned out that rendering the whole page, in case of Writer, rendering the whole page into just a bitmap and being able to view that is not the best thing. But others, for example, an image viewer does today is that it does this tiled rendering. Then it just renders a given selection of the document at a higher resolution, and this way you can zoom in, and just that small area of the document will be rendered in some higher resolution, and still not the whole page or the whole document, so you are not running out of memory and so on. So what we implemented for Writer is this tiled rendering, and now we are working on an Android application that makes use of this tiled rendering. And there is also another, actually it's a GSOC project, a Google SumRef Code project, where a guy is working on tiled rendering for Calc and Impress as well. So hopefully soon, from LibreOffice side, this tiled rendering will be available for all the 3 major applications, and also there will be a viewer on the Android side. Also, we have a desktop prototype. That means that for Android, the whole desktop application as is available. And the use case for this is that when you buy a netbook which has a keyboard and a mouse, so basically it's almost like a PC, except that it runs Android, then it's not a problem for you that the interface is not redesigned to be something touch-based. And you are just happy with the same user interface that you have on a Linux desktop as well. Just you would like to have a working Office suite on your netbook. So that's what the desktop prototype does. I guess we had no formal releases or formal release for that. But if you go to these daily builds from our master branch, then binaries for this desktop prototype is available for download. So that's what we are doing on the Android side. So from most of this, probably the most interesting will be the tiled renderer based viewer application for Android. That's something that's in the works and hopefully will be just as easily available soon as the Impress remote that you can just download from the Play Store. So after Android, we also have iOS, and once again there we have an Impress remote. If you download these slides, then the beta is a hyperlink, so you can click on it and go to the iTunes link where you can try this out if you have an iPhone. And also on iOS, there is a framework for these tiled renderer-based viewers. So there is a tiled renderer-based viewer for writer that you can build for iOS. That's typically for tablets, but if you really want, probably it works also on an iPhone. This is something that you have to build yourself at the moment. Our priority as an upstream LibreOffice project is Android at the moment, but probably iOS will be the next mobile platform where such a viewer will be sooner or later provided. So what we are doing when we are doing something that breaks stuff and still not use our visible benefits. So one thing is the UI conversion. LibreOffice traditionally had its own toolkit for describing all the dialogues, and these dialogues used fixed sizes and fixed coordinates for all the controls. So you can imagine the nightmare when you design the new dialogue and you put in some English string for an operation or for some label. And in English, these strings are typically quite short. And then the next translator comes and says that, hey, please make that button wider because I need more space. And the next one comes as well and says the same because the width of the button is still not large enough. And you can imagine the situation for more than 100 languages. It's an endless process to make each button larger and larger, and then at the end, when you look at the English user interface, it's quite awkward. So the solution for this is that we started to, so once again, Kayla McNamara of Red Hat contributed the framework to be able to construct LibreOffice dialogues from GTK Builder UI format. And then now you can just use Glade to draw all these dialogues. You have to redraw each dialogue that's being converted. And once you did this, then as we parse the UI format, we do the widget layouting just like everyone else did in the past, I don't know how many years. So finally, in English, you have these more compact dialogues, and it's no longer a problem that there is no space for something. So that will be something nice to finally complete. As you can see, we have something like, I guess, a bit more than 500 dialogues or something like this. And so now the majority is done. Of course, the hardware ones are still remaining, so the last few ones are taking time to be converted. But now we also have a GSOC student who is working on this, so hopefully at least for 4.4 we will have it completed. So And that also means that finally you can resize these dialogues. So previously with a fixed widget layout, it wasn't possible to resize these dialogues, and that was also a bit annoying in some cases. So a few words about the document foundation. So what we learned in the OpenOffice times is that in case Oracle controls everything, then it's really hard to claim that the community is something living, and the opinion of the community really counts, and then so on. So in case of the TDF, there is a simple rule that no company or vendor can control more of any committee more than 30%, and that ensures that this never happens again. Luckily, we will. Yeah, so you can here see the members of the advisory board. There are quite some companies providing support for the document foundation, so you can see that it's not that hard to respect that limit of the 30%. And the slide is kind of a mess, but I guess it's a victim of our success. So if you have too many supporting companies, then you will have a messy slide when you have to present them. So how you can help? As you can see, there are quite some companies contributing code to LibreOffice. These are this chart is showing the number of contributions. So this is independent from the number of developers actually doing the work. And also volunteers are split up between known contributors. There are some new contributors somewhere. There is a sign that's also volunteers. New contributors here. So you can't really see how many companies and how many volunteers are contributing. But what you can see is that the number of commits. So if there is on a monthly basis there are more than 2,000 commits in a month, then probably that's a quite healthy and living project. So that's a good thing to have. This is some other diagram here. It's showing the number of people actually doing the work, and you can see that volunteers are the largest part of this. So who are the other larger ones? Red Hat and Collabora and probably everyone else is just something smaller when you look at the number of developers actually doing the work. So in case you are a developer and you already know some C++ and you would like to contribute, then the first thing is that you have to build the source code, and this used to be really hard. We used to have a custom make called dmake, which has nothing to do with make that you know on as the standard GNU make, and we had quite some more stuff than just run and configure and make. And there was a recent blog post where the creator of the blog post claimed that LibreOffice is now ridiculously easy to build. So this is no longer an issue, and this is partly because we are now migrated the whole code base to GNU make, so you no longer need to build a build tool and so on. So it's much easier. So for newcomers, what we want is that it should be possible that there is some easy task that you can solve, which is non-controversial, easy to solve, but still significant. So you can get a feel how hard it is to contribute, and if it sounds like fun, then you can take the next level, picking up something more complex, and then so on. So we created initially a wiki page. Now this wiki page is just just generating data from Bugzilla. So this easy hacks wiki page is listing easy tasks where each task has a description, it has a mentor, and it should be, it lists even the requirements what you need to know, but in most cases only you need to know is C++, nothing else. And all these entry-level tasks are exactly to ensure that new people are not afraid to join the project. And I guess it sort of works because you saw how many volunteers we have. They typically started with an easy hack. So just one slide about the company I'm working for, Collaborative Productivity. We are one of the major LibreOffice contributors. And we also provide commercial support for LibreOffice. So in case you are some large organization with a larger LibreOffice deployment and you have some feature requests or some bug reports and you reported it to upstream, but upstream is not quick enough to fix your problem or implement your feature, or it would be too large to just implement it in someone's free time, then you can contact us. Collabora is providing LibreOffice as a product with long-term support and also providing consultancy around the LibreOffice code base as well. So in case that's the only thing that would hold you back from using LibreOffice, then this is also a variable. So LibreOffice is kind of a fork that's like Xorg was. Xorg was like we believe that it's a good one, especially saying that OpenOffice.org now is dead. It seems that it was a really good idea to fork it in time when still all the Oracle infrastructure was available and we could back up all the know-how around the code base and then so on. As you can see, LibreOffice is diverse, so there is no single company controlling all the development and so on, but used to be a huge problem in the OpenOffice case. And in case any of these, what I mentioned, sounds interesting and you would like to contribute a patch or anything, then just talk to me and I am happy to help. So that concludes my talk. Thanks for listening.
Any questions? No questions. No needed for fixes. Thank you very much again.
There is one.
Hi. I was saying like this one for the last question, but since there is no any question, there is one feature which is requested for quite a lot of time. It is called like soft or the blurred shadow, especially behind the inserted pictures or tables or behind the paragraphs.
Yeah. So at the moment, I guess so we have two types of shadows. Writer has its own implementation, and Calc and Impress is just using the common drawing layer shadows. And I guess in both cases, those are just the strict shadows. And there was one client requesting this feature, and there was some limited budget for that, so some time limitation for this. And we did one implementation, but it was too slow. So it's not about just implementing it. It's okay, but if you have many shapes and blurring can also have many different parameters and so on. So actually, the implementation that first was done was not fast enough from a performance point of view to integrate it upstream. So hopefully that will be resolved in the future. But at the moment, that's the reason why you don't have it. So in case you can have blurred shadows, but when you are scrolling the document, it's lagging like this, then it's more annoying than not having blurred shadows at all. So that's the story behind it. But let's hope that the next what we fixed section for a major release will include blur shadows as well. Yep.
Compatibility with Microsoft Office formats used to be a headache. Is it over now? Maybe Microsoft is more using open standards or something like that, or it's still a problem?
Partly it's still a problem. On the other hand, it's much improved in the LibreOffice times, I guess. So in the Oracle times, they had some limit on the amount of work they did on interop features and or interoperability fixing, and they intentionally limited this. So there was time to change the icon theme or redesign the print dialog or whatever. But if you can't open your XLS document, that's less interesting. Now, in case of LibreOffice, it's much more controlled by what's requested and what's paid by customers requesting consultancy and so on. And because of these, there are much more work done on an interoperability point of view. So back in OpenOffice.org, for example, could open OXML files, these docx, xlxx, pptx, but it couldn't save at all. And LibreOffice implemented this, and also, as you have seen, for example, this VML versus drawing ML rework, that's exactly to improve interoperability a lot. So I guess it's still not 100% perfect, of course. It's kind of hard to implement something that's called a standard, but in fact just describes what a single vendor implemented previously. But still, it's much better than it used to be in the OpenOffice.org or Oracle times. Any other question? Yay, I'm saved. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Great job.